Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Dr. John Cottrell is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first appearance on episode two of Boundless Body Radio. That's right, John was our very first guest ever hosted on our show. Dr. John Cottrell is a certified yoga instructor and holistic living expert. With a background in clinical psychology and certification as a yoga therapist, he merges Western psychology with Eastern yoga philosophy to guide individuals towards self-improvement and personal growth. His company, MBODY, also offers yoga teacher trainings, empowering individuals to become certified instructors and share their passion for yoga with the world. In a pioneering effort to bridge the gender gap in yoga, John designed MBODY Clothing, a men's attire line that combines fitness, style, and comfort and with functionality. John's wisdom extends to his public works, which among others include his books, Yoga with Intention, a yogic journey from awareness to honoring, The Joy of Less, a minimalist guide to simplifying your life, and his latest book, Embrace the Positive, Letting Go of Negative Thinking, all of which are available for purchase on Amazon. Dr. John Cottrell is an absolute super friend of mine. We go way back, and it is such an honor to host him again on Boundless Body Radio. Dr. John Cottrell, welcome.
Hey, Casey. It's great to be back. Hey.
It is great to see you. So the very first time I decided to do an interview, I was looking around my house to see like where would be a good place to record. And I found that if I sat on the ground, on the floor, in front of all my cycle gear, it produced like the best kind of like muted sound and was a good place to record. It has now been over 500 episodes that I've recorded on this podcast alone. And I had a second podcast that I've recorded from this spot right here that started with our episode together.
That is amazing, and congratulations to you. Over 500 episodes. That's just remarkable. I'm really proud of you too. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. I had such a great time interviewing you that we decided to just do a few more interviews kind of in quick succession when we first started the podcast. And we quickly got into a cadence of doing releases Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And we've been able to keep with it. It's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of time, but it's been such a fun journey, and here we are.
And you've had some great guests. I've listened to some of your shows, and I always have to bring a notebook with me because I'm always learning something new. There's one episode I remember you're talking about, I think it was about like vegetable oils, and like I learned so much about just different oils to use in cooking, and it just blew my mind. So you always have wonderful, informative guests, and your topics are fantastic.
Well, thank you. We've been very lucky to have amazing guests, including yourself, on that first episode. Did you know anything about seed oils? It's very curious.
No, not like that. No, it really opened my mind quite a bit, and it really shifted my way of, purchasing, different oils and what I was using, and got rid of a lot of stuff, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. What was it like to kind of like go through the kitchen or walk through the store and be like, oh, it's in that. Oh, it's also in that. Oh, holy smokes, it's in everything.
It's in everything. It just really just blows your mind. And when you get information like that, and and I really see this as a yogic thing, making my shift to yoga here, is there's a concept in philosophy called tantra, which really means expanding your consciousness and liberating your energy. But that first part, expanding your consciousness, is like this blinders that we kind of have on some things in our lives. But if you just take a moment and maybe open your mind and learn about something new, for example, like seed oil, your mind does this. It expands, your consciousness expands, and you just have this broader range of opportunities, really, to make changes if that's the case you want to, to do for your lifestyle, or just to have more information about something. So I really had this tantric effect with seed oils with my mind expansion.
That's very well explained. I love that. And I really hope that through this journey, you're able to notice that your body might be feeling a little bit better, a little bit less inflamed. It takes a lot of time for some of that stuff to work out. Polyunsaturated oils have a half-life of like 2.5 years or something like that, 2 years, 2.5 years. So it might be a journey, but I hope it pays you back by, feeling better, having better energy, better interactions outside in the sun, like all those kinds of things that get reported all the time when people cut out seed oils.
It really did. And just a quick note, because I'm very prone to inflammation. And when I shifted from that, I felt an immediate effect. My body was
Immediate.
Immediate. It was pretty immediate. Like within the week, I felt more energetic. I can feel the puffiness really just kind of deflate. I felt so much better. It was pretty
Wow.
remarkable. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, great to know. I'm so glad we had a guest on that you really got a lot of impact from. You look like you're aging in reverse, as always. Just look younger and younger every time I see you. You look great. And that episode that we did, episode 2, like I re-listened to it again this morning, and it's cringy. It's cringy for sure. This is my very first interview that I ever did, and I expected it to be cringy, but it was actually really pretty good. And it was obviously a huge part where your content was amazing. We got to talk about burgers and our favorite play, Hamilton, but we also got into some really great stuff about yoga and intention that I really loved. And even just today, it's helped me to kind of stop and take a deep breath and appreciate what I'm doing in the moment. And so it's kind of crazy how many times we need those reminders in our lives, but we need them. It's really easy to kind of slip out of that intention and, awareness of what we're doing.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about your work today. Before we get into your latest work, I do have some questions for you as far as psychology goes. So you are a psychologist, and you have an interesting journey of learning traditional psychology, but also learning how to integrate that with movement. How did that journey go for you, and why did you decide to merge those two things together?
It was quite interesting because they were two separate things. I was working as a psychologist and I was working in drug and alcohol treatment, particularly in methadone treatment, where we're treating opiate addiction. And so I was really working with some kind of hardcore patients and clientele. And so that was kind of my main work. And then yoga was something I just kind of did on the side. Now, when we actually first met is when I actually accepted a job at Lifetime Fitness and ran their yoga department. And even then, even though I was running the yoga department, I still saw yoga and something like psychology as something that kind of run alongside each other. I didn't really see and experience the intersection of the two until I had the opportunity, and it happened at Lifetime where, yes, I was teaching group classes, but I had an opportunity through the personal training department to do one-on-ones, and I had never done one-on-ones before, right? And once I did that, it clicked. The light bulb just was blinking. Like, John, these two things intersect. I was like, oh, psychology, oh, yoga, they go together. So that began the process, that began my journey. And so I continued that. And when I shifted and went full time personally with my business, MBODY, and was doing what I called yoga life coaching, I was really developing, what this merger of psychology and yoga can do. So if anyone out there has done traditional therapy, you may go to an office, you might even do it online with a therapist. You just kind of talk through your things, right? And what I learned when I was working at the methadone clinic and seeing clients, I noticed that it was a challenge for many of the people that I worked with to conceptualize all the things that we were talking about in my office, for them to turn it into a behavior outside of my office. It was like I may have used this example with you. It was like they brought their bag and like their backpack, and they were filling it with all this information and knowledge in my office. And then they felt great. And then they would leave and go out and do their lives, but they left their bag in my office. So they left without their tools, right? And that was a good majority of my clients. There was only a small percentage of people that could, conceptualize all this cognitive stuff and put it into practice. And so that got my brain kind of raveling around too, where we needed something, they needed something, they needed to do something. And so when yoga started to appear, we're using our bodies, we're moving. And and part of that integration was, if you learn by moving in your body, that knowledge is not just here in your brain, but throughout your whole system. So I'm teaching things like breathing, some movements, things like that, so they can integrate it into their bodies. Because when they leave my office, they're going to take their bodies with them. And hopefully they'll remember some of the easy tasks that I taught them in our little yoga session or therapy session. And so my yoga life coaching eventually emerged into yoga therapy. So I'm now a certified yoga therapist. And so that's exactly what I still do. People come to see me, we sit, we talk. I get an idea of, how I can apply some yoga things to their issues. Let's say they're, some anxiety around work or something like that, or they're trying to discover or figure out what they're going to do with their careers. And so to kind of get them set, I teach them some very simple breathing techniques. And when they talk about kind of anxiety and feeling nervous about something, I ask them, well, where do you feel that in your body? Oh, I feel that in my shoulders. Oh, I feel that in my chest, or I have butterflies in my stomach. Like, okay, so what are some yoga poses that might target these areas of the body? Maybe some shoulder rolls or some stretching and extension, some things that might help soothe their, uh, the butterflies in their stomach. And then we practice them, process them, talk about them, and then apply those as homework so that they can do it at home. So that's really kind of how it all came together, really allowing people to not only use their intellect, but also their physical bodies to make shifts and changes in their lives and minimize the pain and struggles that they might be having in their lives.
That is super interesting. That kind of answered one of the questions I already had for you about, like, we kind of know, we have the idea that like the body keeps a score. And, I'm I'm a personal trainer, which basically means I'm a cheap therapist. So I'm already doing it basically. But, my work is a little bit different with strength training and nutrition coaching. There's, emotional things and personal things that come up, but it's much more with my wife. I notice this. So she will teach Pilates and she also does tissue release. And I always explain to people, we're very choosy about the things that we put in our space and the things that we hang on the wall. And so she has, down in the basement where she works with people, 7 posters that all show the different anatomy change and how all of the body is connected together. So she can kind of point to things and show people, why their hip hurts and why we need to work on their shoulder on the opposite side or whatever it is. And then the other thing that she has is an emotion wheel, so that people can help identify what emotions they're feeling in these sessions that they're doing with her. And that has produced some very highly emotional responses and some really crazy physical kind of results that I've noticed from that. And so I was wondering, if you are targeting certain areas, people are complaining, it is true, the body keeps the score in your opinion and what you've noticed. And if somebody's feeling something in that area, that's where you want to go.
Absolutely. The body certainly does keep the score and and secretly keeps the score, if that makes sense. Because we might have a trauma or an incident, in our past or even in the recent past where our bodies remember, but our brains may not. And so it kind of gets that emotional energy kind of gets stored away somewhere. It might be in your back, it might be in your hips, it might be in your shoulders. And so then when you start doing some kind of physical movement or just some kind of activity that gets things shifting, and that might even just be meditation and breathing, certainly exercise like Pilates or yoga or personal training and weightlifting and things like that, something inside can literally, I think, breaks open, it cracks open, and that energetic piece that has been stored away, that locked away emotional energy erupts and opens, and you might have an emotional reaction. There's been times, not a lot, but there's been times I'll be teaching a group class and I can see, in the back of the room sometimes someone just kind of stop and maybe even go to the floor and I can see that they're sobbing, just crying or just tears start to run down people's faces, because they probably had some kind of emotional release just through moving through these yoga postures inadvertently without even thinking about it, because that might not have been their intention, but because of that process, they're unlocking something and it releases. And you might have an emotional reaction to it, like laughter or anger or even sadness, and you might cry. And and if that's the case, so if that happens in a yoga therapy session, we have an opportunity to process that, which is fantastic. It's like, what are you feeling right now? We can just, drop in the psychology part. So what are you feeling right now? It's like, oh, I just felt suddenly sad, but I don't know why, you know? Well, maybe something opened up within you. And right now you may not be able to label it or even attach that emotion to a particular um, incident, but just be aware of that release. And maybe as we continue to work together, we'll figure out, what that might be attached to. But it is that the body does keep score. It does
That's
keep score.
very interesting. You just reminded me, actually, I had a client that I worked with when I was at the gym, and we were working on weight loss. She had about 100 and change pounds she wanted to lose. And so I was helping her with that, and she'd lose 10, 15 pounds and kind of go back up. And I'd be giving her the things like, here's what you should do, and here's what you should not do. And fine. And we stopped working together after the pandemic. She came in to see my wife, Bethany, and they were working together. And I think it was based on a certain part of her body that just out of nowhere cued my wife to say, like, do you have any like childhood trauma that you think may not have been processed? And there was obviously an emotional release. They were able to heal her much better. The next time I saw her, dude, she had melted away. She was like gone. All the weight that she wanted to lose was gone. And she's been able to maintain it really well and easily. And she seems really happy. And it's like, yeah, like I did all that work. And now Bethy's going to get all the credit just from one question that had nothing to do with nutrition. Like, damn.
Well, I think it also says how how integrated all of this is, how connected all of these things are. It's certainly nutrition, it's physicality, it's exercise, all those things, and those emotional parts, the trauma and other emotional things that we might have stored in our bodies. And I think whatever kind of healing and self-care work that we're doing, if we can kind of have that mindset and idea that it's more than just the exercise, it's more than just the nutrition. It's good to, have that knowledge to ask those other questions. Is there anything else going on in your life? Stress levels, anxiety, things like that, because it might be that holds them back. And that's what I noticed actually when I start seeing clients individually at Lifetime through the yoga system. I was the referral was made to me. I can't remember who it was, but they said, "Hey, I've been working with someone. They've nailed their diet. They've nailed the exercise. They're doing everything right, but they're not seeing the results." And then when they came in and saw me, we got to some of those issues. And then when they went back to their exercise regimen, then they started to see the shift.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, sitting here thinking, like, why is yoga so different than any other modality? I mean, we're talking about something that came from one region, a certain body type, a certain way they were practicing. There's probably 10,000 other ones from other parts of the world, but this one has seemed to catch on more. And I do see that just like endless kind of opportunity for movement and flow when you're kind of still in the same area would be a good opportunity to integrate those two more than other modalities or other ways that you could move. But we also have learned so much about how the brain is not about facts and remembering things and remembering all the lyrics from Hamilton, although mine does that. Watch it a million times, you'll have it memorized. It's for movement, it's for coordinating movement. And so I don't know if you like actually like I guess studied this particular aspect in a like more what am I trying to say, more seriously, I guess. I don't know if you studied this in a more formal way is what I'm trying to say, but did you notice a link between people who could move more or were learning how to move better? Did they tend to get better faster than people that kind of lost that link between mind and body?
I have to say yes. I did see that. Those who had some connection to their body seem to get better faster. And what I mean is, those that came to me that had some kind of movement background, whether it was exercise or dance or martial arts or anything like that, where they knew their bodies and then they did yoga therapy or just yoga in general, they seemed to do better. Those that um, do better and quicker, I should say. And those that didn't have that same kind of relationship with their own bodies, it just took longer. That's all. It's not like they couldn't do it. It just probably took some more time because they had to get reacquainted really with their own bodies and how to move it and what it felt like to move. And that might be from many things. One might be physical trauma. Physical trauma can certainly detach us from our bodies. And so it's a slow progress for some to kind of get reintegrated with their own bodies and feel safe in their own bodies and to know it to make those shifts and changes. So those are some
Interesting.
of, yeah, some of the differences I've seen.
Interesting. Well, there's always like a healthy user bias. Like people that are more, physically fit will also tend to do other healthy behaviors. They might care more about sleep. They might care more about nutrition. And in the last few years, we've gotten more and more research that's being done, in particular with nutrition. It's more in my field. I don't think this is your exact wheelhouse. It's more in like the ketogenic, low carbohydrate nutrition space. And definitely recent work by Dr. Chris Palmer out of Harvard, who wrote the book Brain Energy, who is finding that he spent his whole career treating people with schizophrenia, bipolar, dementia with pills and treatments, and would make very little ground. But when they started to sort out the nutrition, they could reverse some of these things. And before you and I started recording, you're talking about all your wonderful desserts that you make, all the cookies and ice cream, your entire freezer filled with ice cream. Sounds delicious. And you know what? Unfortunately for myself, I know that if I had a bite, I would have 3 bites, and then I'd have the pint, and then I'd have all your other delicious sounding pints, and then I would be spinning in anxiety. It would be a good 24 or 48 hours of all the things that will never happen to me. My sleep would suck, and I would just worry about everything. And I noticed that if I keep that down, I don't have that. And my peacefulness and mindfulness is much better. Again, anecdotal, but could you say there might be a link there from what you've observed?
Absolutely. And some of the work that I do, or even my yoga therapy, I try to, touch on the different aspects of a person's life, not only just what's going on emotionally, but certainly physically, and even things like, how are you sleeping? How is your eating? Are you eating? Things like that, because as we've said, it's all connected. And I've done some nutrition workshops with folks, with the kind of a yogic twist to it, and really getting people to articulate, or really to brainstorm having a relationship with food, right? And educating them about, what do carbs do, and and what their function is, and are you using carbohydrates properly, in your lifestyle, and does it fit? And does it trigger things, or, things of that sort? And it got people thinking like, oh, yes. And so having a relationship not only with your body, but the things you're putting into your body, how you're treating your body, are you moving, are you sleeping, proper nutrients, etc. It's all connected. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. We do promote low carbohydrate diets. Not everybody needs to be on one. In fact, I think some people could do well on a very low fat, but also more moderate carbohydrate diet. It's just that, like, things like Alzheimer's in particular, when we're calling it type 3 diabetes and this brain is not working properly, awash in glucose. Like, boy, it would be really nice if we had a secondary fuel that could get in there really easy when we can't burn fat in the brain very well. So interesting to speculate about, and I really appreciate your opinions on that. I know you'd have very insightful things to say about it. I want to talk about some of your writing. We're definitely going to talk about your latest book. I want to know, what was your motive on writing the book about minimalism?
Oh, well, that book and the book that we're going to be talking about, my latest book, the inspiration is really, how I want to live personally, right? It's like, um, I feel like I've grown up, um, or I grew up in a household where we just had a lot of stuff. And as I've gotten older, my parents have gotten older, and now I'm in my own home, and all of that. And I still have a lot of things, but as I've gotten older, I realize how much stuff I have, and how I don't need this stuff anymore. I think yoga has really actually helped with that, because one of the lessons that you can learn, at least what I've learned, is detachment, and not I fully identifying, or expressing my identity through the things that I have, if that makes sense, and and that I can live okay without all the things. And so I started to, and I'm still in the process of this. It's been a big process of just letting go of stuff, really, literally throwing things away, because I'm in part, in reality, jealous of those who can and do live minimalist lives, with small, like tiny homes with very little, but live successfully, happily, stress free. And I'm like, I want that. So I just started doing a little bit of research and kind of wrote this book. It was basically based on what I want to live and how I want to live. And so it was really a research project for me. If I follow these steps, I can live a minimalist life. So I wrote a book about it.
Perfect. Good way to remember.
Isn't that what everyone does?
I have not written a book, so
you want to learn something, just write a book about it.
Easy.
And then read your own book.
There you go. That's amazing. Well, before your book came out, there were several other books that have come out about minimalism. And it was about 2 years ago that I kind of went through that process myself. And you're realizing like, okay, I've collected pint glasses. I have 15 pint glasses. I can't drink out of 15 pint glasses. So you get rid of 12 and hopefully those 12 are being used by somebody. I told you I'm sitting in front of my kits. I have a few kits with our brand on it that I absolutely love. It's the only thing I wear. I had like 20 different kits. Like I don't bike that much in a week between laundry. Not all of it would fit anyway. And so it feels really good to declutter our things. I probably went a little too far. Like there was an occasion where I needed to like do something that was a little bit more formal, and I pitched like the last tie I owned, my last pair of slacks. Like, yeah, I probably should have held on to like one pair of slacks. That would have been helpful for this. And the things are one thing. I have to say that after going through that process and continuing to remember that process, like it is nice to have the few things that you really love and enjoy and you appreciate them more, and pitching some of the stuff that you don't use. You took it a little bit one step further. And I remember learning this concept from the book 4,000 Weeks, which is being minimalist about your values and your goals. Can you tell me why you decided to write about being minimalist about your goals?
I think we can get so overwhelmed, with many things, even like life goals. We get overwhelmed, and just to use a very practical example, like you just said, like all the pint glasses, you just have all this in front of you, or even like going to the grocery store and seeing the full shelf, top to bottom, of toothpastes, and you just become so overwhelmed, like which one do I choose? And because we're faced with that on so many different levels, it's many are very sensitive to that, and it's hard to make decisions. It just feels like life has just gotten heavier and heavier and heavier. And so when you have that experience, it's like you can't move. You have that heaviness. You feel like you're under a rock, you're under this boulder, and you can't move out from under it. And so you really can't make any decisions. It's the same with careers and lifestyle changes and things like that. If you've got too many goals out there, even if you're good at all of them, it could be kind of overwhelming. So, well, which one do I choose? What do I do? Which direction? And it actually can stall you in your tracks. And so you might just want to take inventory and just, okay, lay it all out. Like, I love all these things. I can do all these things. But part of doing the inventory work is sitting with the sensation of, I'm just going to call it passion. What are your passions? And what makes you feel really good? What really kind of livens you up and raises that positive vibration in you, that higher frequency, and brings you joy. And, not just feeling happy, but joy and gratitude. Like, yes, and that might help you. It might take some time, but it might help you kind of narrow your scope a little bit so you can decide that's the direction I want to go in. And the thing is, even that can change. You don't have to feel completely committed, like it's locked in stone, it's like, well, I chose this, I have to do that. Life is fluid. It's very flexible. If you move down the line and something else catches your interest and you feel very interested in that and your passion's drawing you that direction, why not go for it?
Yeah.
Don't hold yourself back. So that's why I say, you can, not limit, but just take inventory of even goal setting, because having too much on the table can actually stall you in your progress forward.
Yeah. Okay. So you'll really love this. But this book, 4,000 Weeks, that's the general like lifespan. That's about 78 years. I'm 39, so I've already used up half of mine, and I'm not guaranteed even one more day or one more hour. If an anvil comes crashing in through the ceiling and I die, like that's it. I wasn't guaranteed the 4,000 weeks. And some of the major takeaways, like yeah, that's horrifying, but also you don't need to think that you're going to be great. Nobody's going to remember you in 100 years. You're here for a short amount of time. Focus on a few things and give value and enjoy your life while it's here. And that's pretty much the best that you can do with all of it. And he attributes this to Warren Buffett. He's not sure. I'm not sure if it actually came from him or not. But somebody came to him seeking advice. He said basically the same thing you do. You write out your top 25 things that you want to do in life, and then go to number 6 and below and cross them off. And avoid those like the plague, and only worry about your top 5, because if you spend time on 7 and 14 and 21, you're taking away from what you think is your top priority that you really want to do. So get rid of that stuff. And it eventually made me realize, like, okay, I don't even like golf. I play enough rounds every single year to take a lot of time. I suck at it. Like, why am I doing this? I'm going to quit golf. So I gave my stuff to somebody who hopefully will enjoy golf. And now that's no longer part of my life. I got rid of stuff and I freed up time for the things that I love and running the business and doing the podcast. So that inventory, I think, is really, really important. And being minimal with what we're trying to do allows us to maximize that time and our result here on this earth.
Absolutely. And maybe you experienced this, and as you kind of let go of your like the golf clubs, I mean, did you feel kind of a weight lifted and like, oh, you feel lighter, you feel like you've got more space and then even more energy. You know that tunnel vision I was talking about earlier, that expansion of your consciousness does this, and you can see more clearly, like, oh, yeah, okay, now I know what I want to do, and then you can devote that time and energy into that.
Yeah, that's such a great way to describe it. One of my biggest resistances was this is an activity that I did with my dad. So if nothing else, I can shank my ball all over the place and just buy new balls. But this is time I get to sit in the golf cart and talk to my dad. And I was really worried about that. But look, now we make an appointment every single month. We meet up for lunch and we have that appointment. We hold that appointment. I'm spending just as much time with him, not doing an activity that I didn't like. And yes, there was a lightness from giving that up, giving that away, and not feeling like I had to be good at everything. You know what I mean?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, let's talk about your new book. I want to know your motives for writing the new book, Embrace the Positive. And I'll just preface that by saying, or asking the question, I guess, we have the voice in our head. If we are aware, we can observe it. Why isn't it nicer? Why are we so mean?
It's really it's quite fascinating and in a way mysterious that our inner voice is it has a lot to say. It's chatting a lot to us, and for some reason it's kind of critical or very critical of ourselves and maybe even the outside world. And so part of the focus of this book is, getting you to shift that, or well, one, to notice that negative self-thought or self chatter, right? And listening to it and beginning to shift and getting it to see yourself and the world through a different lens, because we are our own worst critics. And if we're listening and believing that self-critic, like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, I'm not talented, whatever it is for you, and if you start to believe that, then that becomes the way that you live your life. And in a yogic way, I would say that is definitely not true. That is not your truth. That is not who you are. You didn't come into this world and to be untalented and not good at something. You're here for a reason and you have worth. And if you can start to flip that, and the book really kind of goes through exercises and um, ways of beginning to shift that negative and critical talking so it's a little bit much more positive. So you can have that same aspect I keep talking about, expanding your consciousness and feeling a little bit more light, less overwhelmed, more positive, and can easily move forward with confidence, gratitude, and joy in the things that you want to do. But
Yeah.
that critical voice, it's a it's a beast.
Yeah, it really is. It was about a decade ago that I read The Untethered Soul for the first time. And it's like chapter one, sentence one, you have a voice in your head and it's not you. Whap, 2x4, right through the head. Like, what? Have I gone 30 years of my life at that point, not knowing that it was there? And yeah, it couldn't be like, hey man, hair looks great today. Look how big your biceps are. Like, oh, it's so mean. And I remember one podcast host that I follow that tried to make I guess a tool for himself to externalize the voice so that like pretend like you're talking to your wife or your child. You would never say the things that you say to yourself to anybody else, especially the people that you care about. And so right. Let's talk about that. How can we learn to observe our thoughts and realize that we're not part of them?
That's a great exercise, actually, and I talk about that and encourage people to do that very thing. Is begin to one, notice that you have that voice, and what is it saying? And like you said, it's not you. It really isn't you. And if you can kind of begin that separation, like it may sound like you, but it might actually sound like someone else. And just a quick side note, um, if I do some yoga therapy or even just in my other psychotherapy work, in talking about that critical voice, I would ask people, whose voice is that? And it would really bring pause. And people would say, oh, it's my father. Oh, it's my teacher. Oh, it's my mother. It's
Wow.
like, oh, very interesting. So it was allowed them to kind of separate themselves from that voice, knowing that it wasn't them, right? Okay. And so if you're able to begin that separation and or really just notice that you have that voice, then begin to externalize it. Even if you can't separate from it, the way to do that is to externalize it. That might be write it down. As those thoughts come into your head, write it down so you can see it. Like, oh my gosh. So it's in your face. And just like that exercise that you just explained, imagine saying these words to someone you love, someone in your family. Would you say these things to another person? Absolutely not. So why would you say them to yourselves? And now you've got them on a piece of paper and you can see them. Oh boy. So you have to first observe, be aware that there's this thing going on, this critical voice. Let's see it for what it is. Even, and with a non-judgmental mind, it's just words, and just see it as that. Okay. And these are words that I probably don't really want to say about myself. And then we can begin the process of shifting that, changing that. Maybe with every line, every phrase that of that negative self-talk, can you reframe it and say something positive about yourself? And there's an exercise in my book about that too, is that reframing. If you say something critical, can you flip it and say something more positive?
Wow. That's a fascinating thing to ask, is who is that voice? I'm guessing it's, I don't know, 100%, 99% of the time, somebody who is overly critical, overly judgmental. It's never like the loving mother who took really good care of you. I'm assuming that's correct.
Well, it could be, someone who is very caring and that you love and they love you. But sometimes there might just be a blip of time, a moment in time that just becomes imprinted in us. It might just be something like, I'm just going to use just kind of a random example. Let's say you like to sing and your loving mother just says, can you not sing that right now? And for some reason, you interpret that as, I'm a bad singer, right? That's not what she said, right? But somehow your brain did a funny thing and interpreted it as, I'm a bad singer. So you stop singing, right? And so you've turned something that was not critical into something that is critical. That's coming from someone who loves you and you love them, right? And sometimes that develops into other critical thinking and negative self-talk. Just becomes a pattern and a habit. So it's not necessarily a bad relationship with someone. It could be, but sometimes it's just one little phrase, one little blip that somehow our brain goes bloop and it just flips it for whatever reason. We just hear it weird. You're in a state of mind, a state of body that just clicks the wrong way.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for some people because because it might pave the path. Maybe this person who thinks, oh, well, I can't sing, so I guess I'll never sing again. How unfortunate is that?
Yeah, it's been interesting lately to ponder that kind of childhood trauma. And when I've traditionally thought of childhood trauma, I'm like, well, I wasn't beaten, I wasn't neglected, like always had food. No, it's like these little things. The mom probably never thought about that phrase again 5 minutes later, but it would have massive impact, that ripple outward into that life and all the other lives that person touches is massive.
Exactly that. It's just the way that we might receive that information, and it can really shift the course of a person's life. It's really quite fascinating and mysterious, I think, too.
Wow. Very interesting. So, quick aside, I think this is kind of funny. I learned to externalize the voice before I ever asked myself who the voice is. So, I probably have lost who the voice is because I'm always thinking of this thing. And this was a Super Bowl commercial, I want to say like 16, 17 years ago, where the guy, it's a Tide commercial. The guy is doing an interview, and the interviewee, it has a stain on his shirt. And so the guy is talking, but the stain starts talking on his shirt, and he gets louder and louder, and it's just gibberish, like blah, 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 blah. That's what I've externalized my voice to be. So I don't know if I could ever go back and undo that, but that's what I'm always hearing in my head.
That's wild. I mean, would you say that was helpful?
It was, yeah, absolutely. At least it gets me more aware, which again, like you said, is the first, kind of stop on this whole process. Is like you have to see it to even know that it's going on. And that was at least helpful to say, like, oh, I see my thoughts, I hear my thoughts, I'm not my thoughts, I'm exterior to that. It helps create that separation. So it definitely helped to give it a character of some kind. Just weird that mine was a Super Bowl commercial from 15, 16 years ago. Very weird.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good tip for those who are kind of listening to this. It's like, well, how do I even start that process of, embracing, positive thinking and letting go of negative thinking, right? It's creating a character, and it might be a cartoon character or just some, a stain on a shirt, which is something outside of your body, that you project basically that negative stuff onto, and it lives there, and it doesn't live here and here. It gets out of view. I think a big process with a lot of this, and we've been really talking about this throughout this whole interview, I think, is, getting, what's been layered and stuck within us out of us so that you can live more freely, more authentically, etc. And that's part of the process, letting go of this negative thinking, because it weighs us down so tremendously that we can't move forward. And if we do these little exercises like creating a character, creating a voice, or writing it down, whatever your thing is that you can do on a consistent basis, it's going to be helpful. It will be helpful. It might sound silly, having a cartoon character and you project your negative thoughts onto it. It might sound silly, but you know what? It's probably very effective.
Yeah, the writing things down sounded the most effective to me. That's definitely something I'm going to try. But I also do struggle with making that flip from something negative to something positive. You mentioned a particular exercise that you do for that. How does that look?
It might be, let's say, and I use this in the book too, just, like job, for example, where let's say you giving a presentation, I don't know, you're giving a presentation and you feel like you didn't do very well. And so you're kind of down on yourself, like, oh, that was an awful presentation. That could have been so much better, and if instead of, letting that weigh on you, just kind of sit for a moment and just realize what you're saying to yourself, like, oh, that was bad, or I'm bad, I'm not good at this, or something. Really examine that. And instead of putting value on that one little incident and having it be your whole identity. I'm bad at this. I'm not good at giving presentations, or I'm bad at my job. It's reframing, flip it, saying something like, I didn't do as well as I could have this time at that presentation, but maybe next time, or at the next time, with a little bit more preparation and practice, I'll do better. It's just things like that, just to give it a little spin. Like, this doesn't, solidify all of eternity because you felt like you weren't great at this presentation this one time. It's just a blip in time. You've got other chances. And just tell yourself that I made a mistake here, And it's okay. We all make mistakes. Next time, I'll do better. I'll study more, I'll prepare more, whatever it is. There's got to be that shift, that process of, taking what that negative thing is, acknowledging it, shelve it, and put something in its place. And hopefully it's not another negative thing, but something that's positive, that you can reinforce yourself, reinforce your brain, reinforce your body. Because that's the thing with a lot of this type of work, when trying to shift your way of thinking and doing things, it takes practice. You got to be consistent. You know this, right? You got to do it over and over and over again. You won't be successful every time, and that's okay. But you do get better at it. You'll find that even when you make silly mistakes, you can really literally laugh it off, and move forward and move on, knowing, well, that's out of the way. I'll do better next time, and feel good about that.
I love that. That's great advice. I'm so glad you mentioned practice. And that reminded me of what you told us in our first interview all about yoga. Like, yeah, it's going to be really awkward. We call it a practice for a reason. It's not going to be as uncomfortable the next time and the next time and the next time. One of the recent counselors we've hosted on our show several times, she works with people and therapies to help their mental situations. And she said, like, if you're going to a doctor, a psychologist, seeking help for a mental disorder, that's already really hard. Like, that's already very difficult and hard. You're already doing something hard. Changing other things about your lifestyle is not as hard as the situation that you're in now. And it's going to get easier. As you're fixing things, you're going to feel better. So it's really encouraging to hear that the same thing would happen with what you're writing about, because feeling that pain sometimes is very uncomfortable, and it's not very fun. And changing our thoughts, and again, writing down negative thoughts, it's not fun. Like, I'm not looking forward to that, but it's nice to know that taking those steps and doing that practice consistently, like you're saying, makes it easier to take the next step and the next step and the next step. So that's how all of this works as well.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, and I try to encourage people to do this as they're implementing something new, like yoga or changing their diet or even changing their way of thinking. Yes, it takes practice and consistency. And so what I encourage people to do is, like, we'll set a goal. Like, I'll sit with my client, and I've taught them, let's say, a breathing exercise, and I'll just kind of lay it out there. It's like, how many times could you do this during the week? I was like, oh, I'll do this every day. It's like, okay, now let's step back a minute. Will you really do that every day? Will you do this every single day? And they think about it, and it's like, maybe not, even though they want to, and they intend to. But the reality is they probably won't. I want people to have a success, especially at the beginning, so it gets reinforced. And they'll say, how about I'll do it 5 times a week, and I'll kind of give a funny little and encourage them to dial it back even more. I say, now between now and the next time we meet, let's say we're going to meet in 7 days, so 1 week from today, you practice this breathing exercise 1 time. Oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
And what happens is they go do it that 1 time, check, they've done what they were asked to do, they've had a success, and then typically they do it 2 or 3 more times.
That's right.
On their own. And so I like people to have a success. Make it as simple as possible. Even like taking notes or externalizing those negative thoughts. You might not be able to write them all down. All I suggest is to start, keep a piece of paper and a pencil in your pocket or your backpack or purse, or pull out your iPhone or whatever phone device that you might have in your note application and write down or type out one of your negative thoughts. Can you do that 1 time this week? Break it down so it becomes successful. It's like, oh, yeah, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
It might seem elementary and way too simple, but that's the point. We want them to have success so that they can have continued successes.
Yeah, I love that.
Rather than putting them in front of that case of all those toothpaste brands and trying to make a decision, you get stalled. You don't know
Yeah.
what to do. It becomes too much. It's one more thing to do.
Yeah.
So make it as simple as possible.
I love that. Yeah, keep going until you're making it almost like laughably simple. Like we've all heard the stories of the person that wants to get in shape, so they go to the gym and are encouraged, like, look, you swipe your card 2 times a week. Don't go upstairs. Don't go to the gym. Walk around the desk and leave, or go grab some breakfast. Just swipe the card, and before long, it's like, well, maybe I'll go check out upstairs. Maybe I'll walk on the treadmill for 15 minutes. And before long, it's a new habit that they've created, but it only started with something that they could do that would take 2 minutes driving to work or whatever.
Exactly. Yes. You have to really dial it back, way, way back. It's exactly that. It's, not going in and, getting right on that treadmill. It might just be just drive to the location and then go home. Then go in, swipe your card, walk around the desk, go home. You have to really dial it back. It's the same thing when you're retraining. You're really retraining your mind when it comes to embracing positive thinking. You have to retrain your way of thinking and seeing yourself and seeing the world. And if you can do that in these little small steps, the greater success I think you'll have. It might take more time, okay, but you'll have the success.
I love that. Okay, so as we're progressing and getting better and better with all this practice, what are some other steps in the process that you write about?
The one big thing, and it's in chapter 6, it's all about self-compassion and self-care. And you'll notice throughout the whole book, it's kind of threaded with this knowledge or this, I intersect or inject self-care. You've got to take care of yourself. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. There's a whole section on just mindfulness, being aware, um, meditation if you want to try that, breathing exercises, healthy eating, healthy sleeping, just ways to take care of yourself. And they may seem obvious, but it might be things like, it could be things like, um, I'll use my personal example. I just told you before the interview, I've been experiencing the joy of baking cookies and cakes and making ice cream. That's joyful to me. And for me, it's self-care. Yes, I might be eating a little bit too much of it, but I don't mind because I love it, but I enjoy making it and it makes me feel good. So do the things that make you feel good. Do the things that bring you joy. And that's important. So that's threaded throughout all of this. So as you're doing these other exercises like externalizing and writing things down and reframing your thoughts and all of that, in the meantime, what else are you doing just to feel good? I think that's so important, so important.
So important. I love that. You know what it's like as a business owner. If you're not careful, you're running your business every single waking hour. And I found that I need to put place markers at certain times to be able to take care of myself. There's a time when I open my laptop, and there's a time, whatever my to-do list says, that, you know what, it's done for the day. I did what I could. I've got to step away. And part of that is I schedule in a time in my afternoon where I have permission from myself to do whatever I want. I could take a nap. I could watch Formula One videos. I could watch Hamilton again. I could do whatever. Like that's my time to scroll around on Instagram and watch cat videos if I want. And I found that kind of same thing. It helps me get refreshed, helps prepare me for my second part of the day. And so that self-care is really important. What other ways can people take care of themselves? Like as you're working with people, what are some of the common answers you've heard? Is it like massage, take a warm bath, things along those lines?
It's all those things, and I think, and even if it could be a guilty pleasure, like like you said, watching cat videos, um, going through your Instagram, because we get so many negative connotations around some of those things, like, oh, that's bad, you shouldn't do that, and all of that, and so we start to shame ourselves in regards to those things. But if in moderation, and you've carved out a little bit of time, and if that's your little joy moment, take advantage of that. I think that's okay. I think that is healthy. It can be healthy. You can make it healthy and good for you. So other ideas, yeah. It might just, be you like to read. So it's magazines, or you're reading a novel, or fiction or nonfiction, anything like that. Watching television. Maybe you've got a television show you like to watch. You've recorded and you have a special, you've done with all of the, the things on your to-do list. Now it's time to carve out some time for you. You can turn on that show and enjoy and have a good time. Having a cocktail, having something delightful to eat. It's we got to really dial it back to make it one a success, like we've talked about, and something that really is enjoyable to you. And removing, and this is part of the process, is removing judgment, not judging yourself, because that's what we're trying to eliminate or at least reduce, not judging yourself for doing these things. If they feel good to you and they bring you joy and they're going to keep you on your positive path, then why not? You know?
Yeah. Well, okay, so this type of book, this is not the first type of book that covers this type of thing. People have been writing about this stuff for a very long time. What I am really appreciating with all of this is there's so much practicality. There's exercises, there's how-to guides, there's all kinds of different things that people can actually take from this and really do. Is that the part that you're the most proud of when it comes to this book?
Yes, because I wrote this again thinking about myself, thinking I want to live more positively. And so the book is integrates both things that I already do and have learned myself through research and yoga and psychology, etc., that I've put into practice that I feel that works for me and wanted to share. But also I wanted to learn more too. So I did some research and found some new things about how I can live more positively and think more positively. So that was the joy in writing and putting this book together. So when you look at the book, it's 15 chapters, which seems like a lot, and it is, but it's written kind of in broad strokes. I've just kind of touched on different areas. And so what you can do as a reader is kind of maybe pick what illuminates for you, like, oh, I want to focus on self-compassion. Oh, I want to work on those toxic relationships. Oh, I want to teach my kids how to think more positively, because it's all in the book in broad strokes, giving you the invitation to maybe dig a little deeper, meaning you might have to go to other resources to get more information, right? But what I do add in the book is after each chapter, there's a worksheet. So after each chapter, you have an opportunity to answer some questions, take some notes about, name a toxic relationship that you're in right now. Who is it and what makes it toxic, etc. And so it really helps you to externalize and visualize the things that are going on presently. And it gives you some steps on what to do next with this new information. So you have these work pages. And I will say that if you get the book, I've got the book here and it's kind of a nice size. This is a kind of a
Beautiful.
Good size.
It's beautiful.
Book.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you. Good size book, easy to carry and read and everything. But after each chapter, like I said, there's like a sleep tracker. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a sleep tracker and actually literally blank pages, blank pages so that you can make your notes. But it's not the easiest book to take notes in. So I created a companion workbook.
Nice.
Okay. Which is more of an 8x11 and a half, 8.5 by 11 book, which has all the worksheets in it. So if you're a little bit more serious and want to, okay, I'm really going to do this, you've got your workbook with you to easily write in. I also have it in digital form, so you can download it and then print out pages. And so if you really want to do the work, you have the pages and the practicalities in order to do the work.
That's amazing. I love that. You did the workbook for me, by the way. I abhor writing in books. I hate doing it. I bought a stoicism journal once that I worked through, and like to write it, and I'm just like cringing as I'm writing in there, only to find out there was an accompanying PDF. I could have just printed everything out and wrote on that. Do you find that it's helpful that people go back and read some of the things they wrote maybe after it's been 6 months or a year? Can that be helpful for them to say, like, okay, maybe I'm not where I want to go, but look how far I've come?
Absolutely. I think that's so important. Whether it's like a worksheet like this that's in the book that gives you some guidance, that you, after 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, go back and look, because you'll see your progress. You'll see where you were and how you are now. I like to do that with journaling, and that's part of the experience with this book as well. Journal, write things down. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you doing? Write it down. And then go back and review it. Another thing I'll plug here is that I've been creating digital prompt journals. And so, like for the month of September, for example, if you like to journal and you want to journal, but you don't know what to write about, get a prompt journal. All it is, it's just each day, September 2nd, September 3rd, there's a prompt. It gives you suggestions on what to write about. And you just go ahead and do that. So I have these digital forms of that. You can also print them out too. I think that's another way to help you see and feel and understand what's going on in your brain and in your body. And then, yeah, give yourself the assignment to go back and look at those things.
Yeah.
And you'll see the change because it's subtle to you as you make these changes. It'll be more obvious to other people. But when you go back and read what you wrote 3 or 6 months ago, you'll see the change.
Very interesting. The prompt thing would definitely help. When I sit down to write, you don't know how to start, at least getting something to get to get it like nice little flow going. That must be very helpful. Okay, favorite question to ask. What is one story from a reader of your book or somebody who's taken through this process that you'd like to tell? Could be something recent, something major, something minor, just something that comes to mind. And the second person I want to ask about is yourself. As you said a few minutes ago, you wrote this book for you. What has your process been like writing the book? And how when you do that for yourself and you look back on how you were thinking or what you're writing about before this process and afterwards, what things have you noticed in yourself?
The first question, I just had a conversation. It was actually kind of a text conversation with someone who actually lives across the world, someone in New Zealand, actually. And we just got talking about things and and just talking about his life, his lifestyle. Some things are changing. He just turned 50 and just trying to kind of navigate things and where he's going from, from here on out. And I brought up some of the I brought up that I wrote this book. He says, this is exactly what I need. This is exactly what I need. And I talked about, the broad strokes of, this book touches on different aspects and of your life, toxic relationships, self-compassion, self-worth, changing negative thinking to positive thinking, etc., and all these exercises that you can do in this work in the worksheets. He says, "This is exactly what I need. I'm getting this book," and he ordered the book. So that was, I think that was a feel-good moment for me, but I think helpful for him, and plus the reason why I wrote the book. The second reason why I wrote the book. First reason, to answer your second question, is it was for me. It was for me to not only share what I've learned about positive living and thinking and wanting to share that, but wanting to expand my own consciousness and horizons. As I'm getting older, and sometimes I find I call myself a crabby old man, or I don't want to be that crabby old man, right? So set in my ways, right? And it's like, I want to keep things fresh and fluid and not get too critical. So what can I do as I live the rest of my life here, live the rest of my days, living positively and happily? And so writing all this down, getting it out of my system, so to speak, and then doing the research and learning so much more, like reading about the culture where people live over 100 years old and are thriving and have. So I write a little bit about that in the book. It's not extensive, but it gives you the invitation to explore that more, because there's wonderful information and research around, that lifestyle and what they do, like what are they doing to live so long and to be so vibrant and exuberant in their lives. I wanted to learn about that, so I wrote about it. So I feel inspired, invigorated, certainly motivated by now I've got my own resource. I've got my own book. It's right here. If I need a little kick in the pants, John, there you go. pull out your worksheet, pull out that book, chapter 7, get to work, man. It gives me a go-to. It gives me something to go to when I need to do my personal work.
Wow, I love that answer. It's such a cool process. I hope the listener takes away from this conversation what I'm taking away, which is all of us need to go write a bunch of books for ourselves. It's that easy. It's not that hard. Just go write a bunch of books. Easy. I think back when I first met you, this is 2007. I'm so glad that you were the one to teach me yoga. And I'll thank you for this every single time I see you. You taught me one thing that always stands out is I was going from a pose to a pose, to another pose. And you taught me it's not about the pose, it's about the travel between the poses as well. It's all of it. It's all included. Where I'm trying to go from A to B to C. It's like, no. This is a flow and a process. And you helped me understand that. And to go back and think like, oh, this dude could ever get better and improve and be more and more amazing year on year on year. It was like impossible. And even just talking with you 3 years ago and texting you every now and again and all the advice you've given us about how to start the business and run the business, it's been so invaluable. And so I'm so grateful for you and all the wonderful work that you've done in your life. I've always just been in awe of you, and it's so cool that you were our very first guest and now you're our latest guest. So just so grateful for you and for taking the time out of your busy life to be on our show today. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, that's so thank you so much. I really, really appreciate those kind words, Casey. Where people can find me, I think kind of the central location where you can find kind of everything John Cottrell is actually johncottrell.com, because you'll see my yoga classes, my YouTube channel that has, yoga classes on there. Links to my Amazon author page so you can see the different books, including the digital prompt journals, and even go to my other site, which is called onecakewonder.com, so you can order a cake and get some cookies and ice cream. So everything John Cottrell can be found at johncottrell.com.
That's awesome. We will link that in the notes. And it's so funny. I was reflecting on this today. My last 3 interviews that I've done, I was on Steve Cutler's show. I hosted Tyler Sugimoto on the show. Yes. And today I get to talk to you. So looking back, 16, 17 years ago, our management meeting lunches, which were so super fun. Anyway, it's just so great to catch up with you again. And I'm so glad you're keeping yourself busy, but also putting out such good work that can really help people. So thank you again for everything you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for having me as a guest on your show a second time. I really appreciate it.
I feel like it won't be the last. Thanks again. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.